Today we're joining the Editing Made Easy series, and we are in part 3. Wow, this is good. So I am going to remind you to go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm just going to quickly recap what we've covered. So if anybody is totally new and they missed out, there are videos available and we'll make sure that you can see it. In the first part of the series, we did editing with Excel, which Christina showed us from her own Excel is the good old style, good old days of editing, which you love, right?
I
do. Well, but you improved it. So we did the Excel and we shared Christina's example and some others. And we also had a book list of all the different resources that are out there to teach you how to evaluate your storyline, your story arc, find the key scenes. And this has been the premise for Christina in kind of moving over from being just a writer, not that it's just but from being a writer to becoming a professional editor and designing some software that we here at First Editing are using. So that was the first section. And we did include that book list and the Excel on the screen, so you can see that if you haven't seen it yet. Second, we went into the evolution of editing because, Christine, what was it? Excel and Word came back in the 1980s.
Early 80s, so 82 to 85. One was earlier, and then I think Excel came later. But yeah, that's how long it's been since there's been improvement on how to edit your story.
Isn't that crazy? I need to get my big hair back. So anyhow, the evolution of editing, we wanted to go over the different editing stages. And we've talked about how those haven't changed since the 80s. So now we're updating this with new software. And of course, technology is zooming off. But we're showing you behind the scenes what the editors are using nowadays and how we evaluate what a writer needs as an editor, and so that we can help them best. And part of that is we also like to show that there are 5 key deliverables, and we mentioned that the last time here, that these were basically, you could go through your key scenes location, your story arc, and the different elements there, the scenes, if they're balanced and themed, you want to go through the confirmation of that, looking at the word count of each scene, each chapter overall. And then, of course, what we do as editors, we've provided them, but now it's way, way better, is a professional summary letter, which outlines everything that you're challenged with, everything you're doing well, but also it shows you how and why you should revise it by sharing our expertise and sharing I guess there's kind of a lingo we use also that if you're not familiar with it, I think it can be quite confusing. So anyhow, there we go. Let's see here. And now we're going to go into Excel and beyond. So it's how you structurally edit with objectivity. And today we're talking about the Fictionary 38 story elements and how we use them as editors and how you can use them as a writer. And if you can't use them all, because it's a long journey, how you can become more familiar with it and learn so that you become a better editor overall. So please feel free to keep dropping your comments here. I'm going to look and see if we've missed anything. Oh my goodness, we have, let me see. 1 second here. We have a lot of people joining us. Christina, this is amazing. So we have everyone from Ontario.
I'm from Ontario, so that's nice. Hi, Ontario people.
Idaho, Texas. This is an interesting name here, so I'm wondering where they're from. They didn't share with us Harnick, so I'm wondering if that's up north here. I live in Sweden, but I'm currently coming to you from the Canary Islands off the west coast of the African continent. South Carolina, back again with South Africa. This is great. So, yes, we have the links. We'll share them with you. You will get them in an email. And Sydney, Now that one I give them kudos for because it's
Yeah, it's got
early.
to be late there or super
Early,
early.
late,
One or the
something.
other.
One. So, and San Antonio. Okay, so let's get started today. Christina, I want you to kind of talk about your experience and where we've been, and so that we can kind of jump in with what we're evaluating. We have the 38 story elements, so preempt that, and then we'll break it down for them.
Yeah. So last week we talked at a high level on story editing with the story arc, word count per scene, scenes per chapter, characters in the scene, who's got the point of view, et cetera, et cetera. So all the high level stuff. And today we're going to go down a level. But first, I wanted to share something with you that I think might be helpful as we. I'm going to try and do this really quick so it doesn't leap at us. Okay, Joellen, can you see writers versus editors?
I can see.
All right.
So I know that Christina has her current work in progress here for us. So this is pretty exciting. Okay.
Okay. Now
I see it. Yes. Okay. Now I see it. There we go.
All right. So if I hit play so it goes full screen, can you still see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, all right. So we're there. Okay. Before we start, so Joellen's been a bit mean to me. So last 2 times ago, I had to show my actual spreadsheet of the work I did and my MS Word document original. And so now what she's asked me to do is show an edit that I'm working on right now. So one of my novels. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a writer and an editor when they're performing a story edit. So they're 2 very different skill sets. I mean, even editing from writing is, of course, a different skill set. But when you look at how a writer approaches a novel and an editor approaches a novel, it's quite enlightening to see what happens in the different phases of the process. And I've worked with thousands of writers and editors around the world. And this is my overview of what I see people doing. So first we start with, obviously, the writer writes the draft and the editor reads the draft. So basic, very simple, basic difference. But now what starts happening is when a writer is performing a story edit, they've created the voice. So it's theirs. Every writer has a voice. You may not know what yours is to start with, but you'll have one. And the editor's job when they're doing a story edit is to not influence the voice.
Correct. We do not try to change it. We try to maintain it. We try to smooth it and keep it consistent from your perspective. But a lot of people worry about that. Don't change my baby.
Right. And there's a big difference between commenting or making suggestions on stuff for clarity, for tension, for hooks, for all of that kind of stuff. That is not the author's voice, right? The goal of an editor is to help the writer make the best story possible without changing their voice, because the voice is what makes you unique, and you want that to be unique.
Yeah, exactly.
The job of a writer, hard work, is to motivate yourself. So you got to figure out how you're going to motivate yourself to get through revisions. And I quite often hear from writers, it takes them longer to revise a story than it does to write it. So performing a story edit is a long journey, and somehow you got to figure out how to motivate yourself. And I'm not the person talking about that because I'm not a self-help person, but you got to do it. On the editor side, when they have performed a story edit, their job is to motivate the writer. And so sometimes when you get a package back from an editor, it's overwhelming. It's huge. It's pages and pages and pages of input. And it's really, really important that the editor motivates the writer to keep going, to think about the revisions, decide which ones they're going to incorporate or not, but to know what they're good at and that they can achieve a good story.
Exactly. And part of that comes with the summary letter that you should be receiving from any editor that you're working with, because it should tell you what you do well, and it should also show you challenges. And sometimes, you can be too, I think editors I've seen in the past have been a little too teachy. They're getting into just fixing, wrong, that red pen mark, when that's no longer where we are. We also know that there's ways to help the people through the revision, to encourage them, to help them, well, as we say, coach them to become better self-editors and better writers through that process.
Yeah. So the next difference is the writer revises text. And you can do this in two ways. When you're doing your story edit, you can just mark, comment, highlight, whatever, what you want to revise and do it after you've gone through your whole novel, or you can do it as you're going. Totally up to you and what your process is. But the writer is the person who physically makes those changes. If you've hired a story editor, their job is to suggest revisions, but not make them. So mostly a story editor will be commenting on story level issues. They may do some copy editing, but even with copy editing, it's the writer's choice on whether they are going to revise the text or not. And the writer owns that. It's your book. And I really strongly recommend, if there's copy editing done, do not do an accept all. Read through whatever the editor has recommended, because one, you might learn something, and two, you might totally disagree with what they're saying. And so there is a responsibility on the writer's side to make sure they are deciding accept or reject any of the comments.
And I think it's important for people to realize that one of the other reasons is that ultimately it's your name on the book. You may or may not acknowledge the editor in your book and all that, but regardless, you are held accountable for everything in it. So if there is a mistake, or if there's something missed, or if there's something that you don't agree with, or if there's any kind of change, it's going to reflect on you. So our job is to make you look good, but you got to make sure that you don't let anything slip by and that you agree. Yeah, it's a dance. It's a dance.
Okay. So a writer can be anywhere from never written anything to have written hundreds of novels. So very, very new or very, very experienced. An editor cannot. They need to at least be trained.
At least.
In story editing, not copy editing, not line editing, not proofreading. They need to be trained. So there's a different demand on a writer versus an editor. And a writer has that complete joy and freedom of just writing their first draft, which is a lovely thing to do. But the editor must be trained.
Right. Correct. The writer.
Okay. So then we have on the writer side, and I heard a new term the other day. So there's the pantster, which is me. You'd sit down and you just write that first draft without much of a plan and no outline, and you're just letting it rip. There's the plotter on the other end of the extreme, who plots out and has an outline of their entire novel. And then there's the plantster. And I actually think I fall into that category a little bit more than a pantster, because the plantster is the planner pantster. So they're doing a bit of both. And I suspect most writers are actually in that category, where they might lean one way to pantster or the other way to plotter, but there is some organized thing they're doing with when they're writing their draft. And then particularly when they're performing a story edit, they get a lot more organized. But the editor must be organized. There is no pantster in editing. You can't wing it. You must
There's no pantster in editing. There's no crying in baseball.
That's right. Pantster in editing.
No, that's really great. And I think those are the people who, well, we all love our bullet points, I think. And that's just, you've got to get it through it. But having an organization helps. Maybe not too methodical is to take away the creativity. Excellent.
And then a writer can have any background at all. People come from all over the world and write great stories. And editors must be educated on story. They have to have a specific background.
Correct. And it really makes a difference on them being educated on the story. And once you also get into specialists who know your genre, because you need to know a certain amount, but having somebody who's familiar with your genre is definitely a plus there. So make sure you get somebody who's familiar with your genre, who has helped others. There's a whole series of things. And anytime you want to ask about what I think you should look for, please, let's do that.
Yeah. So now we're going to get to the next level of how you actually story edit. So here's where we get to the practical aspects of what you can do. And I wanted to just start this session off. This will be my final chart, and then we're going to go right into the app, and I'll show you what's done there. But so this is the story arc from Fictionary with the suggested plot points. And you can see in this story that plot point 2 is too early and the climax is too late. And that means the story is going to drag in that particular session or section of the story arc. But what happens, so you as a writer, if you're a writer, you'll have your draft finished, And at some point, you're going to decide it's time to do your revisions. And so where a writer starts on a story edit is to look at the high level structure of their novel. And in this case, we're looking at the story arc to see, do you have all the key scenes, first of all? First, that's number one question. And if you don't have all of these 5 key scenes, you're not ready to do a scene by scene evaluation of your story. You have to go back and figure out the overall structure. Yes. And then you can go to scene by scene editing. An editor starts the other way around. They've never read the draft. So they start with scene by scene editing, work their way through the book, and then go back and look at the structure, because there's no way for them to figure out what these key points are. And they must figure out what these key points are and tell you if they're in the right place or not, or if you have them or not. But they can't do it until the end. And so an editor approaches story revision or story editing much differently than a writer. And today I'm going to show you from a writer's perspective how to approach this. Okay, I'm going to just stop sharing for a sec. Let me get out of here.
Excellent. Excellent. So this is kind of giving you the idea of what we're doing. And basically what we've also talked about is that by using these new systems, by using this new method, and using this evaluation and having a step-by-step method to editing and evaluating your story, it makes sure that we're more objective. And that's what we're talking about today, is using the 38 story elements as a list, that, as we do as editors, to kind of show you behind the scenes what they are. And we'll share this list with you. We'll email it out if you like. You can find a lot on Christina's website and mine and on YouTube and whatever else. We've been really going through a lot of this. But once you have that, it really makes a difference in being able to confidently say, at least from my perspective as the owner of an editing company, that, yeah, this has been thoroughly edited. And if not, we can see it instantly. Oh, there's parts that were not covered that the editor didn't cover. Now, editors are trained, but they should also have an experience in the niche and things that, like I mentioned before. So that's where they put it into the notes and the feedback and the criticism and the things like that, the critique. But just covering the basics, it's very evident to see if they've been covered or not. And it strengthens your story.
Yeah. So before I get going on the next section, I'm just wondering if people can put in the comments. So I'm going to show you my novel that I'm personally editing right now. So you're seeing my real, true, in the moment editing that it's up to date within the last few days. It's the last time I looked at it. And I'm doing it from the perspective, I decided I'm going to look at it from the perspective of the Save the Cat method. There's many methods. There's a hero's journey. There's story grid, whatever you use. But I've chosen Save the Cat. I wanted to see what my novel looked against it. So I'm curious how familiar people are with Save the Cat. So if you could just maybe do like a yes or a no or a little or something, and then I can kind of decide where I need to talk on that. And now I don't need to wait a second because the delay from YouTube.
It is the delay. And we talked about Save the Cat in the book, in our first session when you were referencing the ones that you've used to outline and evaluate the editing. So we have everyone from very familiar, a little, to heard of it but don't know specifics. Yeah, loving it somewhat. So I think we have
got a wide range. Okay, I'll talk to that. So I'm going to share my screen and go right into my novel, and no heckling because it's a draft.
Well, we do appreciate this. And the great thing about looking at this is you're seeing the licensed professional software that First Editing uses and story coaches use, and that's available through Fictionary to evaluate your website, or not your website, to evaluate your book and your work in progress.
Yeah. Okay. So can you see my Fictionary page, Storyteller? Okay. So this is chapter 1 of Look the Other Way. And what I've done, so Save the Cat is a methodology that you can use if you want to look at more in-depth structure along the lines with our story arc. And so the first thing I did here is I named all my scenes. And I like to do that. As you can see on the left side here, it gives me an after draft outline. So I can see things. So I've named it using both the Save the Cat names plus my own name, so I know what it's about. And so the two things I like to do first when I'm story editing that just get my head around my story and I can refamiliarize myself with it is to start out on the plot tab, and I put the scene name here. An opening image is a term that the Save the Cat uses for what is the opening scene of your story. And then they have the final image, and the two must mirror each other. And so it's a reminder of read the first scene, read the last scene. Do they mirror? Does it make sense? And then my own personal name is an offer on house. And then what I did is here you can add any scene name you want. I won't add anything right now, or sorry, purpose of a scene. And I went through, and you can see on the side here, I've got my opening image. My theme is stated. SU stands for setup. So I put all the scenes that were setups. In our lingo, in Fictionary lingo, we talk about inciting incident. And here I've used the word catalyst because that is a Save the Cat terminology. And I've gone through my whole novel and I've put in my purposes for every scene. And what that tells me is, one, can I name every scene? And can I say why it's in the story? And if I can't, there's probably a problem with that scene. It needs to either be cut or rewritten, shortened, lengthened. Something has to happen to it to make it fit. So one thing that Storyteller does is it lets you take a look at all of the purposes of a scene. And these ones here, so the StoryCat methodology talks about a setup. And then after the setup, there's also farther down, you can see final image, climax, all of the smaller ones. But anything that is a section of the novel, there's the debate sequence, which is the sequence where the writer goes from the inciting incident or the catalyst to debating whether they're going to move forward until they get to plot point 2, where they actually make that decision. And then plot point 2 is the fun and games section called in Save the Cat. And all that means is this is where it goes forward, backward, forward, backward. The protagonist gets what they want. They don't get what they want. And that's whole exciting thing leading to the midpoint. And then at the midpoint, the bad guys close in. And so from the midpoint to plot point 2, where the protagonist will be at their absolute lowest point, that's where it starts to get really, really difficult and goes down, 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 down for the protagonist to the dark night of the soul, which is leading up to the climax. And then comes the finale and stuff. But the interesting thing about putting all the purposes in, when I'm looking at the Save the Cat, I can see my setup is only taking 5% of my story, which is a bit low, and their recommendation is 10. So I'm going to go back and have a look at this and decide, well, what could I do to make the setup a little bit longer? And then I didn't even, in the original version, I didn't have a debate sequence. So I had to go in and put this in, and I'm still working on it. So I don't quite know yet if it's the right percentage or not. But the Save the Cat has a beat sheet, and they tell you kind of the ranges of where this should be. And so I plugged it right into Fictionary to help myself work on that. And here, this opening image, I actually rewrote it because I thought I don't have the opening image right. It's completely wrong. And so I rewrote it based on that. So that, Joellen, I'll stop there for a second and see if you have any comments.
Well, let's see. We have quite a few comments on.
Oops, that's good.
Let's see here. We're talking about the manuscript and inputting and the flow and how the developmental editor helps with this. So, and then we're also having some problems with the image. Some are having blurry, but I think we're good. Right. I think we're following there. And again, we're pulling this out. This is the evaluation, the scenes, and with the 38 story elements, you are looking at the scenes and the plot and the characters. So it's very good to watch. So carry on.
Does this make the image better? I just made it bigger in Chrome.
I don't think it changed anything here. We'll have to wait for some feedback, but it could be, the streaming to the person's individual. So
okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right. It's not your problem. Or your fault, I mean.
Once you've done your story arc and you've decided as a writer, you've come in and you're going to do your scene by scene evaluation and revision. You can look at it from a character point of view, from a plot point of view, and from a setting point of view. And as a writer, you may know where you have issues, in which case pick the area you have issues. So if you know that your characters aren't connecting with the writer or with the reader, and that's feedback you get, maybe focus here first. So you kind of have to evaluate, or you can just go through all of them. We have a basic mode, which takes off. If you went through and just did the basic elements, it will make your book better. It's not as good as doing all of them, but it will get you started and going. So if we look at the character, I'll just say one more thing before I do that. So we have character, plot, and setting. And these are my actual notes of what I want to do with the scene. So I write my notes on the side. I put check marks when I've done the ones I want. And if I have page level revisions, I'll also note them here so that I don't want to work on them now because I'm still revising and I don't want to be doing sentence level stuff at this point. I want my story stuff straight first. Mm-hmm. So when you're going through, you want to look at, you want to name your scene. It's just free text. You can name it whatever you want, but make sure it makes sense to you. So later you can come back and go, oh yeah, I want to check Jake has a past. I want to check something in that scene. Easy things to do are the opening and closing types. And these will give you an idea if it's more for the overall flow of a story than the individual scene. You want to see that you're not falling into patterns. And if we look at, I'll just pull up the closing type for this book. And you can see here, I use very, very little description. I mostly use dialogue, then thought, then action. And so as I'm revising, I want to make sure I don't lose description altogether. And I want to make sure that I'm not overusing dialogue too many times in a row. So I can scroll down here and see I've got 3 here. I've got 4 scenes dialogue in a row. I might want to change one of those. And you can look across your whole book and see there's 4 scenes of thought. Here's 5 scenes of thought. So there I'm falling into a pattern, probably not the greatest. That's a good thing to change. So this is, even though you're looking at the scene, this is really overall flow of your novel. So it's more of a structural thing.
So these again are, if you're struggling with this, and this is not an easy jump in, do it yourself fast thing. You do learn as you go. Mm-hmm. So if you're struggling with this, of course, your editor is also doing that. So you're seeing behind the scenes what you can do if you're using the software yourself, or if you want it a done for you kind of situation where the editor is going through and looking at each of these and they're marking that off. We mentioned that last week where they're showing you which opening thoughts or opening types and closing types, but they're also making sure that every one of these elements exists. So they're marking it and confirming, validating your work as you go through.
Yeah. And here, for example, these ones here, you'll fill in. So what's the entry hook? And my recommendation when you're doing these, so an entry hook is it's just something that keeps the reader reading. And I'm going to just jump to scene 2 for a second. So here, very clear one, we're letting you go. So why is Shannon getting fired? And the reader knows this is Shannon because from, it just came on from the previous scene. And the exit hook is, why does the boss say she has to stop thinking? You can just scroll over here. So much about others. So she leaves her with the whammy at the end of the scene. And I recommend when you start doing this, you actually try and write down what you think these things are. You can just give a check mark of, yep, got an entry hook. Yep, got an exit hook. But if you can't articulate it, you probably don't. And it's a way to test yourself to go, am I being honest with myself? Do I really have an entry hook and an exit hook? And these, again, overall flow, 1, it makes the scene exciting. And 2, it keeps the reader at the exit hook. Oh, I have to turn the page. And then there's an entry hook. Oh, I have to keep reading. So really, really important. And here you can see, I didn't give myself a check mark at whether I have the scene anchored. And what that means is, does the reader know who the point of view is? Do they know when the scene is taking place? And do they know where? And so I've said yes on the who's the point of view and where, but way down here somewhere we find out, yeah, see, I'm coming to the mid of the scene about what we looked at a house last night. So now they know only 1 day has gone by, but that's too far down. If the reader's just reading this, they don't know where or when, and it's confusing, and it could jar the reader out of the story. And so this needs a bit of work to get the scene anchored and up a little bit. So I'm just going to go back to scene 1 here. So basically, you go through all of your plot elements. And these 2 ones here, the scene middle and the scene climax. So when you're doing a scene by scene revision, you want to be looking at, does every scene have a beginning, a middle, and an end? And it's the same as the story arc structure, where you want it to, something has to happen in the middle that makes things either better or worse for the protagonist or the point of view. And at the end, there needs to be a climax to the scene. It can't just dwindle out. And if you name your scene and can articulate quickly what the middle and the climax are, then when you're doing your revisions and you want to come back and check something, this really gives you a strong, solid outline.
Right. Excellent. So this is our plot. Those are the different elements that we have there. We have both advanced and basic. So we're going through those.
Yeah. So then we'll look at characters. Now, I know for me personally, when I'm writing a draft, I get a bit carried away and I might add a lot of characters. Or one time I wrote, a beta reader pointed out to me that I'd renamed a character halfway through the book. Okay, not a good thing.
All the time.
So here you can look at who's in this scene. Lance the Loser is her fiance, and that's what I named him because I don't like him. However, knowing who's in each scene is really important for knowing how much page time a character is getting. And you want to have time for your readers to connect your key characters. And this is a way of seeing, well, who's in the scene? Do I need everybody? Do I have a scene where there's 11, 15, 20 characters? Is that reasonable? Does it make sense for the scene? And yes, it might be. If it's a baseball team, fine. But it might not if it's this scene here where it's really only 2 people and that's all we're interested in. Point of view, you can pick your point of view based on who's in the scene. And so it's different from your protagonist. So point of view is just who's telling the story for that scene. And I probably talked about this last time. When you're picking your point of view character, you want to pick, if you're not sure who you want, if you're clear, it's great. If you're not, you can ask yourself, well, who wins or loses the most in this scene? So it can either be them or the antagonist to that person who has the point of view for the scene to make it most exciting to the reader. And this is a tool you can use to keep track of your overall point of view structure for the novel. And you can look at how many points of view. And here I have 4. And Shannon is my protagonist, and she's got 49% of the novel. And it's because there's 99 scenes in here. So it just happens to work out. Normally, these 2 numbers would be different. Jake Hunter's the love interest. He's got 40, so that's not bad. The boy's antagonist, he's got 9. And then there's Charlie, who I don't want to have any. And he had 2 scenes. So clearly when I was writing this, I didn't do what I had intended, which is fine. And then if I look way over here, Charlie comes in at the end. Somewhere near the end. I'll find him. There he is. There he is. So Charlie comes in at the end. So I would go back and read scene 89 and go, why in the world is that from his point of view? And get rid of it. Because I want a book that's written from Shannon's, Jake's, the boys, Shannon, Jake's, the boys. And that's how I want my structure to be for this story. And I didn't quite get there.
Exactly. And this is really great. Can you show us the word counts just a little bit on that? I know that when we evaluate that, but that you were looking at the point of view, but that you can also see the balance and the theming there.
You want to see the word count per scene, or you want me to go back
to for the characters? Can't we break it down there? Well, the scenes are per, but of course the scene from the point of view of the character, they interact.
You want
it's fine.
Per character or characters per scene?
Characters per scene. No, scenes per character. Scenes per character. I was thinking about that because you're also, then that shows us where Charlie's popping around, doesn't it?
Yeah. So here you can see Shannon. What this is showing is the order the characters come in and how many scenes they're in. Mm-hmm. And so Shannon's got the most. That's great. This is her helper character. So that's okay at 82. 85 is the love interest. But we can scroll. Charlie comes in somewhere near the end and we can find him.
There's Charlie, 46.
Yeah. So he's in 46 scenes. and has the point of view for 2. So he's, and you can see the other issue that this is highlighting is this is, well, so the midpoint of the novel is about here, the way this is scrolling across. And look how late these 2 characters come in. So I've got this character way over here. So I'm thinking when I do my revisions, Charlie's got to come in way back here because he's the antagonist. So why is he coming in that late in the story? So he's going to get bumped up a little bit. And by looking at the visuals this way, you can see what's wrong with your story. And I can, without going to an editor, I can go, oh, I have a problem there. So I'm going to fix that. Before I go to my editor, I am going to fix this so then my editor can work on the harder problems where this I could find on my own just by looking at it. The other thing I can look at here is I look at all these one name, one scene, 2 scene people who come in here. And I can go, do I really need them? Do they need to be named? Like maybe one's a bartender and I could just say the bartender doesn't need a name because every time you name a character, the reader will then think, oh, I better remember that. This must be important. That character got a name. So I need to now go back and go, I've got 36 characters, but do I need all of this? These people, Winston, Sheila. And if I don't, so Winston, you're like, well, where did he come in, right? So there's 2 ways of figuring that out. And we can go up and we can have a quick peek at the story arc. And I can see what Winston's first scene is just by going over here and finding him. Now he's going to show up. So there is his one and only scene, and I can read it right now and you just go, here it is. He's in this scene. So it means then I can really quickly read this scene. I could also look, what was the scene number? Oh, I skipped over one. So he was scene 54. I could also look at him over here if I wanted to, where I want to revise. So I would just go down, find scene 54. I would read scene 54 and figure out, well, who is this Winston guy? And do I actually need him here? Yes or no? And you can see where I am in my editing, right? Where I start to slow up. I've done lots to up to here because this is my actual work in progress. So there, I'm going to go back and look at this scene and I'm going to go, well, why do I have this Winston guy named? I don't know. Maybe I can get rid of that.
Exactly. And I mean, this is just showing you, there's a little bit of a discussion going on here about how to use it and whatever, but I'm going to put this up on the screen. It's a software and it's just kind of showing you how you're matching everything here. And it helps you fill in the blanks. It's the same tool that professional editors use, not to change everything and make it bad or right or wrong. Your creativity is there, but this is making sure that nothing was overlooked, that has been determined over the ages is pretty much essential to making a strong story arc. And that's what we're looking for.
Yep.
Again, you can opt in, opt out of this, but as a self-editor, it's good to know the process. And as an editor, we're trained, to go beyond. I mean, all of our editors they have publishing experience, they have degrees, they have all this, and they're certified also. But how do you make sure that you don't get too far into subjectivity and you still stay in the objectivity of what's required? So just kind of sharing what was going on in the background here. There we go.
Yeah, I can't see any of it because my full screen is with
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, for me, when I created this software, I created it so it took the drudgery out of editing, because I did all of this in a spreadsheet and you think, okay, I need an analytical brain to analyze my story, but I need my creative brain to revise it and rewrite it. And I wanted the creativity to be mine. So by having a structure around it, then my brain now is focusing on the creative part, and I'm not tired out from doing all this structural. Like the first time I drew out my word count per scene, like seriously, that was so I didn't want to spend my mental energy on it because it's tiring, and I want my mental energy on the creativity of my own story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I mean, having this, it allows you, now that this is part of the evolution that we're talking about, that by having this, it allows writers to be better at their own self-editing and their own writing, because they're not independent of one another. And then of course, to show what the editors are doing now, so that ultimately you're going to invest in a professional editor at some stage,
Yep.
be it the structural editing, the line editing, the final copy edit, whatever, to know what these people these people are trained in and what their specialties are and what you should expect.
Yep.
So, and if you can learn and do this yourself, great, but be prepared to take the time to learn. It's not an easy process, and this has been developed over a lot of time. And of course, using these tools is what makes us all better. And remember, there's a million people sitting right now writing and typing
Yep.
the next story. So how do you stand out? This is what we're doing. So the editor is there to help you. The editing tool is there to show you exactly the steps. And, as a writer, you need to use both of them continually, in the same way the editors do. You wouldn't omit the best tool available. If you're going to compete, you need to have the best tools available at this time.
Yeah, I mean, the tools, and of course the tools aren't for everybody. The goal here is really to help writers who want their books to be widely read. And historically, over time, all of the books follow the same form since the beginning of time. Like, just is the way the brain likes to experience a story. And so these are all guidelines to help a writer do that. And you can pick and choose the ones you want, or none. Totally, like it's a writer choice, and everybody has to find their own process. And really, I'm just sharing mine and putting my novel out there to give people an idea of what it takes actually to revise your own novel seriously, and to really how hard it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy.
Yeah,
and it helps you determine where you are. It's an evolution not only of editing, but it's an evolution of your writing experience. Where are you? Are you struggling with syntax? Are you struggling with the story arc? Are you struggling with the balance, theme, whatever these different things are, and putting it into easy to locate, easy to identify, and hopefully easy to understand. One of the great things is when an editor goes through and does this, if you aren't familiar with the software, what you get back from one of our story coaches is the access to the back end here. And also there's an intelligent assistant there explaining any definition or vocabulary that you may not be familiar with. And that's really important. And that's all tied in through the notes. And I'm going to share your screen here again. That's tied in through the notes. And it's also tied in through the professional summary letter, so that you can go through and you don't have to cross-reference. The first issue we looked at was you had your Excel sheet, you had all your books, you had your plan, and you put it into action. But now you can easily have it all into one section using this, advanced intelligence and technology to better edit and more quickly and less energy, as you said, just sucked out of you. So, and that applies for the editors too, of course, because it makes our editing, more enjoyable. We can actually focus on because we're doing objectively all the things we know we have to, then we can also step forward and do the subjective editing and the critiques and the feedback and the recommendations for your revisions based upon our experience, and not struggling just to get through the basics. So it's very good.
So let me just do a couple of things. Regardless of how you're actually doing this, there's a few things you can look at for every scene when you're doing your self edit, which is really, I think, what people want to get to here. And so, the first things I suggested was name your scene, figure out the purpose of a scene, check your entry and exit hooks. If you do that, your plot is going to help your plot. No matter, it's just going to help your plot. And then for characters, depending on what story you're writing, you want to look at who's got the point of view and what's their goal. And the goal is really, really important. So if a point of view character for a scene does not have a goal, they're not doing anything, and the scene's going to be boring. And the goal can be subtle, but the reader has to know there's something there, or it can be really in your face goal of, I have to get out of this sinking boat, from one extreme to the other. But there must be a goal. And then it has to be hard for the point of view or the protagonist to achieve that goal. And there must be obstacles in the way. And they can fail or succeed, but if either way, there has to be a consequence, and the reader has to know that if they fail, there will be a consequence, so that tension is there through the whole scene. If they succeed, great. There will still be tension because the reader will be thinking, what if they fail? And then they're nervous about that. Mm-hmm. So the goal is really, it brings on all of the other things that go around it, and it will help you just boost up tension in your scene by having a goal that's hard to achieve, that has consequences either way. And then, so if you take that with your scene naming and the purpose of a scene, so you know why the scenes are there, and then you know who the point of view characters and what the goal is and the consequences, all of that together is going to give you more tension.
Correct. It's beautiful. I mean, everything is pushing forward your story. And if it's not pushing your story forward, then this allows you to identify that, as you did with Charlie, and determine, okay, yep. Do I fix it? Do I cut it? Do I add it? What do I need to do to really make it work? So again, it's just little things to make you stronger. It's, yep. This is your coach inside kind of helping you through it, the same way an editor is giving you more feedback and helping you, develop the story that you dreamed of, become that bestseller you want.
Yeah. Okay. Now, on that, I'll just pop over to setting. I'm going to give you the two things, my two favorite things about setting. And one is, well, I found this really hard. So I'm just, I'm going to put it how I figured out how to choose my settings. So you need to know where the scene is taking place. And so location here is just where it is. And so scene one here is they're in a house that they're thinking of buying. So it's a possible new house for them is where the Shannon and Lance are. But the important thing to ask yourself is, what's the emotional impact of that setting on the story? And this came to be because in my first draft of my first novel, I have every scene in a doorway, starts in a doorway and is in an office. And you think, oh, seriously, do better. So by asking yourself, what's the emotional impact either to the reader, to point of view character, or the protagonist, antagonist, but somebody in there in that group, what is the emotional impact of placing the scene in this setting? And the example I like to give is so you have a couple and they're in a coffee shop and they're having an argument. Okay, there's tension there. And maybe by this point in the story, the reader cares if they stay together or they don't, or there's some consequence if they do or they don't. And so the reader is vested. But in that coffee shop, either one of them can stand up and walk away. If they don't like the argument, they can go, oh, you're an idiot, I'm leaving, right? Not going to happen. Or put them somewhere. They're in an elevator and the elevator breaks down. Now they're having an argument and they can't leave. Or they're on a chairlift on a ski resort. Something where, or a long drive where it's in the winter and you can't just get out of the car because you're between two cities and there's nowhere to go. And now all of a sudden there's emotional impact from the setting. And if you look at every single location you choose and ask yourself, is this the best place for emotional impact in my story world? Because it has to make sense, of course, in your story world. You can't have, well, maybe if you're sci-fi or fantasy, you can, but it still has to make sense within your story. So you have to pick something that is consistent with your story world and somewhere the characters would logically be. But once you've agreed to that, then you pick your setting. And so if you just look at character plot and setting and pick some high level things, you can take that and make your story better without having to go through all of the 38 story elements. You can now just pick some high level ones. And I hope then you would get kind of in a role, and then you start looking at the other ones, you get more excited because you're actually seeing the improvements in your book.
Exactly. Just answering some of these messages here.
All right. So we're 10 minutes to. Why don't I stop sharing my screen and we can look? Do you want to look and see what some of the questions are?
Sure. Let me pull that away. So I think we've done pretty good. We just really wanted to, I want to emphasize that, you got to walk behind the scenes today and you're seeing the 38 story elements. We don't possibly have enough time to go through all of these one by one today. But we do have an online series on YouTube that you can follow, and we have those going out. So you can ask either Christina or myself more information. Just contact us. But again, it's showing you behind the scenes of what a certified story coach uses and what a writer can do for themselves. So it's between the two in there. So we'll now open it up to any questions we want to catch in here.
Yeah, I see a couple. So Kevin is asking here. So the market for this is editors, and it's both. So we have Fictionary Storyteller, which is for writers, and that's for writers who want to do their own revisions and self-edit their own story. And I think all writers should do this anyway because it's fun and it makes your story better. But that's my personal choice. And then Story Coach is for professional editors. So there's two different journeys, right? One is for the writer and one is for the editor. And so that's kind of why I wanted to go through the beginning. If you're a writer or if you're an editor, these are the different things you want to be looking at and focusing on.
Exactly. Let's see here. So there's a lot of discussion on that, but we did have some questions up here a little bit earlier. Let's see here. We have, do all the first editing editors use this software? All of our team from the fiction department, as we say, were certified by Christina, and we were the first enterprise in the world to do this. Basically, as the CEO of First Editing, I couldn't see why I would walk away from this. It just makes sense because it allows us to be objective and subjective. We know that we choose and vet our editors. So they're trained. Many of our academics have PhDs, they have higher level degrees, they have experience in different niches, and they've worked in the publishing companies. So to take the next level and certify them in an objective step-by-step process, which allows us to use this licensed software, the best we can offer, and it really gives us a jump in the marketplace. So it provides the best return. I mean, our clients are very, very happy. So yes, we are certified, especially if you're going to do a story edit.
I'm going to just bump up here. So Pat asks, it appears the writer is doing a lot of work with the software. What auto functions does the program have? So yes, there is no way around it. The writer has to do a lot of work. That's part of revising. Yep. So the automatic thing. So when you import your manuscript into Fictionary, so Fictionary is cloud-based. It's online software where you import your manuscript, and then what happens is Fictionary analyzes the manuscript and it draws your story arc for you, and it's within a range. So it's showing you where it thinks your key scenes are, and then you as a writer want to go and validate that and make sure you agree. And if you don't, you want to reset it so it actually shows what you think they are, what you want them to be. It pulls out your word count per scene for you, so you can see the structure of your story from a word count point of view. It then does how many scenes per chapter. And again, what you're looking for is, are you theming correctly? And do you have the right balance? So those are some of the manuscript level ones. On a character level, it draws the character arc. And what this is so I'm going to try and do this really quickly. So it's just at the end of the scene, is the protagonist in a better place or a worse place for achieving the overall story goal? So I'm not going to, it's too long a discussion. I should have brought that up. It's just too long. But it will pull out, so Fictionary pulls out your, all of it, give you a character list of all your characters in the scene, and then it links those characters to scenes, and it does a first pass at figuring out who the point of view characters are. Now it's natural language processing, so it's doing it from context. So of course it's not perfect all the time. And then you can look at all of the insights on the character page of how many characters you have, when do they come in, how many point of view scenes they have, do you have scenes with too many characters, that sort of thing. And so those are the automated pieces. And then around it, every time you edit your story and make revisions, those things update. So the story arc is always updating. If you add scenes, delete scenes, make them shorter, make them longer, it's updating. Same with the word count per scene, etc. And then we didn't get into the story map today, but we'll look at that next week, because it's the way, if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of revising each scene, it's a really interesting piece of the app. to look at specific things like tension versus conflict and stuff like that.
Excellent. Then we had a question here I wanted to, it kind of ties into what you're talking about. And it's about how do we enter the manuscript? Do I have to have a complete manuscript to input? Or can I input the draft and keep working on it and watching how it evolves? You're going to need a complete manuscript in terms of a beginning, middle, and end. But of course, it changes. Do you want to go a little bit more into that?
Yeah. So I'm just going to correct that just a tad. Yeah, just a little bit. So the whole app is designed for long form fiction, so a novella or longer. You can write from scratch in it. You can start with word zero and write. That's our goal is really to help with revisions. And so we're really focused on writers who have some form of draft, but you don't have to have a completed draft. The story arc starts to draw around 15 to 20,000 words. And you need enough number of scenes and connecting scenes. There's a whole formula behind it, but everything else in the app works. The story arc, you need your full beginning and middle and an end because it's assessing the beginning, the middle, and the end. So you need the whole thing, but everything else works. And so we have some writers who write their whole novel. We have some writers who wait till they have a really tight draft and come in, and then everything in between.
Excellent. Excellent. Just going to put that up there. So let's see if we have some other questions here. And again, that's also the evolution of your software. So that's really great. Let's see. Okay, I need to go back up to the top. And I want to thank everyone for coming here and following us and joining. So make sure you sign up. And we're going to have the 4th session before we start losing everyone. We're going to have the 4th session next week in 7 days. You will get a replay of this video. So if you have more questions, you can email us. You can reach out to us. We'll be there. So, and please make sure that you follow us and subscribe. Ding, 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 ding. All right. So, did you see another question you wanted to address right there?
I'm just trying to scroll up. There's so many comments here. It's difficult to read through them all quickly.
I know. So much. So this is good. Okay. And here's one, a new one. Is there a guideline about narrative, how much there is and where, and how chunks of it relate to scenes? This may be a little too big to take in the last 2 minutes, but if you can do a sound bite, go.
A sound bite. Oh my. Okay. A sound bite. That's a hard question there, Janice.
Yeah.
So yes. It's really, it's backstory together with flashbacks, together with revelations, and evaluating it all with the story map. But you know what? Let's take that question and I'm going to answer it next week with a proper answer instead of an off the cuff. Because it's a hard question. I don't think I can answer it in 30 seconds.
Nah, we can't. But I do want to remind everyone to sign up for next week's seminar. Please follow us and subscribe. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us via our websites. We are always there. This is Christina from Fictionary.co, and I am Joellen from firstediting.com. So please join us again. And thank you so much for coming out. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your interest. And we really enjoy being here with you. So let us know how we can make it a better adventure for yourself. And we'll be sending out the 38 story elements list and follow up with the video. Thank you for joining us, Christina. It was great having you here again.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.